say that my story is a haunting, just a presence that I feel every day. My grandmother died in January 2003. At that time, my daughter was only 14 months old. My grandma just lived and breathed her grandchildren. We always used to say that the love was so strong that she would probably come back and see them. Well, I think that is exactly what is happening in my house. I've never seen her, but I feel her presence. My daughter, I would think, would not remember my grandma because she was so young. It's been over a year now since her death, and my daughter is now 2.5 years old. She constantly talks about Gigi visiting her in her room. Gigi meant great-grandma, and that's what all the kids called her. She tells me things that she wouldn't know. She sees pictures and knows exactly who she is. She tells us that Gigi visits her in her room at night with a flashlight, or she will say, "Tell Gigi to stop waving at me." Last night, as I was tucking her in bed, she looked at me and said, "Shh." I said, "Why?" She responded that Gigi was standing right there. I casually just said, "Oh yeah?" And she again responded, "Yes, she is right there and she is waving at me with a ladybug in her hand." And she proceeds to tell me that Gigi plays with her and her toys all the time. After she said that, she looked over to the area where she said Gigi was and smiled and laughed. I said to her, "What are you laughing at?" Her response was, "Gigi. She told me that I have to start using the potty." Jamie is still potty training. Another time, we were driving in our car on our way home from shopping. It just so happened to be my grandmother's birthday that day, but it was not mentioned at all. It was just in our minds that today was her birthday. My daughter said to me, "You know what today is, Mommy?" I said, "No." "What?" She said, "Today is Gigi's birthday." I was shocked. I asked her how she knew about that, and her response was, "Gigi told me herself. She's sitting right next to me, almost as a matter of fact sort of way." Different things like this happened since she died. I don't feel that she is haunting us. I just feel that she loved my daughter so much that she likes to see her. Do you think that is the case, or am I going crazy? When I was 10, both my grandparents died. Before them, my aunt and uncle died also. They lived with us. Both nights after we found out, my sister and I both woke up in the middle of the night to feel our bed shaking violently while everything else in the house was still. Then, after coming home from each funeral, the door to the bedroom was seen opening and shutting. About 7 weeks after the door, lights went on and off in our basement when no one had been down there. When walking into our rooms, one of my sisters, brothers, or my belongings would fall off of a shelf. My cat was seen chasing a string, hanging in midair, as if my aunt was playing with her. Creepy feelings of being watched while watching TV in my living room were also felt. When outside, you could hear your name being called softly in a little girl's voice, then childish laughing. Random cold spots can be felt around my house, even near heating vents while the heat is on. Computers randomly turning on, and so do faucets, lights, TVs, and radios. Sometimes footsteps can be heard in my house, hurrying up and down the halls. Once I even heard childish crying, like the little girl ghost who calls your name and laughs. I know this story is a little shorter than most, but I appreciate you listening. Does anybody know what's going on exactly? I'm pretty sure it's my grandparents, but who knows? This is something that happened in an old farmhouse my mother lived in quite a few years ago, in a little farm town in Ohio. When she and my younger siblings moved in, they would call and tell us things that were happening around the house. The first thing was the lights either coming on or going off. I told her to tell her landlord because it was faulty wiring. However, when my daughter went to spend a week with them, they were sitting watching TV and the light was turned off. My sister had to actually get up and turn it back on. So, we knew things were really going on. My mother told me about hearing cars pull up the lane, but when she would get up to look, nothing would be there. This went on for a while, and then she called and told me that one night, when she heard the car, she thought it was my brother coming home, and she just rolled over and went back to sleep. Later, she heard water running in the tub, but it didn't go off. She got up and went to check, thinking my brother turned it on, and went to sleep. When she went in, the tub was almost running over, and my brother had not come home yet. This happened quite often after the first time, so they made sure to check the tub whenever they heard water running. So, we went to pick our daughter up one summer, and I was lying in bed by the window, and everyone else was asleep. I heard a car pull up into the driveway and saw the lights flicker on the window and go off. I raised up to look, but nothing was there, so I had proof of that part of their story. However, after lying back down and trying to go to sleep, all of a sudden, I felt someone or something lay their arm across my waist, just like if it was a spouse, laying there in spoon fashion. I screamed so loud, I woke the whole house. We figured whoever this was, my husband and I were in their bedroom. It scared me really bad at first, knowing no one else was in there. But after the initial shock, I was not afraid because I did not feel threatened by their presence. These things went on until my family moved out. And that's the end of the story. Hope you enjoyed. As a teenager, I lived in Emory, Texas, in Rains County, and had a very strange experience when we first moved there. Our first residence was in an apartment building that had at one time been the Rains Cole School. When the new school was built, the old one was abandoned until someone bought it and decided to turn it into apartments. During the renovations, a group of local children were in the old school gymnasium, playing in what used to be a storage building to hold the chemicals and supplies being used in the work and repairs. Apparently, there was a large drum of flammable liquid in storage there, reportedly paint there, that was ignited by the children playing with a lighter or matches. In the ensuing explosion and fire, one of the boys was killed and the others injured to varying degrees. The gymnasium was destroyed, but this building was connected to the part of the school that was being turned into apartments. The renovations were completed and the apartments were ready to be occupied, hence my family enters the picture. We were the first occupants of apartment 12. The first night we were in the apartment, we heard a lot of movement in the attic area, which my mother put off as some type of animal being up there, even though it sounded awfully loud to be a small animal to me. The next day, I was talking to my next door neighbor's son and asked him if they heard anything in the attic the night before. He said he had heard something every night since they had moved in, and said his parents too had tried to explain it away in something simple. We talked to some of the other people in the building and found out that a lot of them had heard the same thing. We also found out that the ceiling directly over the apartments were a drop ceiling, so that it would be easier to keep the apartments cooler in the summertime and warmer in the winter. This was very distressing to me, because that would make it impossible for someone to be walking on this. But to us, it sounded like heavy footprints directly overhead, but that is in the end. After about a week, we kept noticing little things, like objects apparently being moved forward from the places they were being left. The strangest occurrence to me was a music box belonging to my mother that had a baseball on it and played Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Somehow kept moving off the shelf it sat on and onto the living room table, sides being moved around. We would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of it playing in the living room. My mother kept blaming my little brother and me for this until she was home one night alone and woke up to the sound of the music box playing by itself and sitting on the coffee table, even though she knew that it was on its shelf when she went to bed that night. We finally got used to this happening on a regular basis and even started joking around with each other when we couldn't find something by saying the ghost must have moved it, even though to my brother and me it was still a little creepy. Finally, Christmas time rolled around and the fun really began. We put up our Christmas tree on Thanksgiving Day, right after dinner, as is our family custom, and took great care in placing the ornaments, as many of them were handmade ornaments from our mother, dating back to the time we were born. The next day, we were up bright and early to head out for our other family tradition, the day after Thanksgiving shopping spree, which was always an all-day affair for us. When we returned that evening, we unloaded the car and were dividing up tape, wrapping papers and bows to go into our rooms and start wrapping gifts, when we noticed that all of the ornaments on the tree were completely rearranged for how they had been when we left that morning. We then moved them back to where we wanted them and went on our way, wrapping presents, and didn't give it a whole lot of thought. After we finished this, we placed our gifts under the tree, made hot chocolate, and listened to Christmas music. The next morning we woke up, only to discover that the ornaments had once again been rearranged, and not only that, but the gifts under the tree had also been moved around by someone during the night, and the music box was once again sitting on the table in front of the couch. We were all pretty well freaked out, but resigned to the fact that no matter what, our guests had a definite opinion on how things should be, and we were fighting a losing battle. During this time, I somehow began to develop an attachment to our guest and started thinking of them as a member of the family. This was the young boy who had been killed during the fire when the renovations were being done, and he was lonely and looking for a friend. I even started asking our friend where things were when I couldn't find them, and it was almost like something would tell me where to find them. I even began telling our guests goodnight when I would get ready for bed at night. This continued throughout the Christmas season, even though I had learned to accept things. My brother and mother couldn't, and she decided it was time to look for someplace else to live. Shortly before the end of January, my mother announced she had found a house for us, and we would be moving the 1st of February. While we were packing for the move, we kept noticing that the things we were boxing up kept appearing back where they had been, like someone didn't want us to leave, which was very disturbing to me because by now, I felt a real attachment to our guests. One of the saddest moments of my life was when I closed that apartment door for the last time because I felt like I was leaving something or someone very important behind. The strangest part was, I could have sworn that I heard a young boy's voice telling me goodbye. I've been a fan of your website for a couple of months, and I connected with some of the stories that have been listed, although I felt some of them were far-fetched. I've always been drawn to ghost stories and understanding the paranormal, even considering taking college courses in paranormal studies. I never really thought about why I was so drawn to it, till my older brother and I were talking about all the different houses we lived in. Throughout my life, half of the houses, maybe more that I've lived in, have been haunted. Ever since I can remember, there was always something going on in my house, whatever house we were in at the time. One of the first houses I lived in, the first I can remember, the previous owner's grandmother passed away in the house and decided to stay. Most of the haunting, from what I remember, I was maybe 3 or 4 years old at the time, was centered in my older sister's bedroom, but the grandmotherly ghost liked my closet too. I figure she liked it because my sister's closet and mine shared the same wall. I was often tucked in by her too. My memories are hazy, but I don't ever remember any harm or maliciousness coming from her. 9 years later, the worst haunted house we lived in, well, that one had a reputation of being spooky. It sat on a double lot, full of plants and grass, overgrown and neglected. Many of the neighbors' reactions to us moving in were, "Oh my god, you're moving in there?" No one ever wanted to tell us why they reacted that way, or why they would come up with some lame excuse for the reaction such as, "We're just surprised, it's been empty for a while." We soon found out why, with good cause. It wasn't a gradual haunting, starting off small. It was as if we were disrupting someone's routine, and we were unwelcome. I still get shivers when I think of that house and living there. The atmosphere was stifling and oppressive. I was so frightened, I couldn't get a handle if the spirit was male or female, but looking back, I think it was male. He liked playing with electricity, flickering the lights, and sometimes turning them off completely, leaving us in the dark until he found it to his benefit to turn them back on. My brother and I were usually the only ones to experience these things, while our parents continued to be skeptical. They preferred to ignore the unexplainable and hired an electrician to check out the breaker panel. Nothing was found. No surprise to my brother and me. I was stressed, trying to stay out of the house as much as possible, getting by however I could. Then I had the nightmare. To give you a little background on this, at the time, I had a Winnie the Pooh giant stuffed bear that I had since I was 3. In my dream, he grew claws and teeth and flew through the air, chasing us from the house. We needed to get away from that place. That was the message in the dream, loud and clear. Waking up from the dream, I looked across my bedroom to see my Pooh Bear looking at me. I could have sworn I had put him in the back of my closet. That was enough for me. I ran to my brother's room and dived in his bed. I sobbed and begged him to let me sleep with him, and he held me and calmed me down. Soon after that, my father lost his job, and we lost the house. Thank God for miracles in disguise. A few years after that, we lived in a house where the owner died in my bedroom. The haunting was slow and gradual, and it was my first experience with night terrors. I wrote it off as being stress, and at this time, I was a little more well-read on the subject. I knew that being a teenager, I was more susceptible to poltergeist and high-anxiety paranormal activity. But then, my brother experienced the presence too. We were laying in my bed, talking, and this thing came through my window, traveled between us, and circled the room, exiting where it came. I say thing because it was invisible, but we felt it, heard the energy in the form of a high-pitched ringing. I felt more relieved I wasn't alone, or crazy. Since then, I've experienced many more spirits, night terrors, and deja vu experiences. I seem to be sensitive to these things. I would appreciate any and all feedback. You know, every ship in the Navy has a ghost, or at least that's what they say. I've been in the Navy for 11 years now, and I'm on my 4th ship. I haven't noticed a ghost on all of them, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. I did notice one though, a few times. The ship was the USS Frederick, LST 1184. It's decommissioned now, but when I was there, I met the ship's ghost before anyone even told me there was one. But for the sake of the reader, I'm going to tell you the story about how the ghost came to be first, and then I'll tell you how I met him. All Navy ships have a compartment called a sea chest. This is a void on the bottom deck of the ship that is used for quick ballast. It can suck in water, but force water out by creating either a positive or a negative vacuum in the space. Needless to say, you don't want to be in one when it's operating. Well, this poor soul on the ship went down into one of the sea chests one day during his watch. He didn't have to be in there, but he wanted to take a nap and not get caught. Nobody knew he was in there, and nobody bothered to check, and they engineered lid off the sea chest pumps by creating the vacuum in the space. Within seconds, the poor kid's head imploded as the air got sucked out of his body. Now his ghost haunts the ship. It travels from space to space, mainly in engineering, looking for people that are sleeping on watch. If he finds you sleeping and you're on watch, he'll violently wake you up. This could be anything from making a loud noise to what he did to me. I was sitting in my shop. It was around 2300. That's 11 p.m. for those that don't know 24-hour time. I was technically on watch, but my watch was an on-call watch where they just needed to know where I was in case I was needed. I didn't have to stay up or even stay in my shop, but I was up and in my shop, and I got tired, so I leaned back in my chair, facing the door, and closed my eyes for a quick power nap. Now, my desk was against the bulkhead wall to the left and was facing the door. The only way into and out of my shop was through a large metal gated door that squeaked and rattled when it moved. Along with that, the only way to get to me was to walk around the right-hand side of the desk, which was at the time a maze of broken equipment that I was working on. I was sleeping for maybe 5 minutes, and I was by no means sound asleep. out of nowhere, I felt someone punch me on the left-hand side of my chest, really hard. I had a bruise there the next day. No, I didn't see him, but I know it was a ghost for a few reasons. 1. There was no way for anyone to get in my shop without me knowing it. 2. No one could have hit me as hard, or where I was hit, without first coming around my desk, and second, breaking my pen, which I kept in my left chest pocket. The final reason I know it was the ghost, it was because I immediately opened my eyes and saw no one there. The next night was the kicker about that ghost. He never went into the berthings. That's where everyone sleeps. Some say it was because not enough people on the ship believed in him, but I think it was simply because people are allowed to sleep in there. But that night, he went into my berthing. I went in my rack, bed, and I had that feeling that I was being watched. So I woke up, opened the curtain on my rack, and looked out to see who was there and what they wanted. There stood the ghost. I knew it was the ghost because he had no head. He was standing there, facing my rack. When he noticed me looking at him, he gave me a small bow, which I took as he was sorry about the night before. He hadn't known that I wasn't sleeping on watch. Hey everybody, and it's raining, so if being scared's out there, he could do scary stories told in the rain right now, and it would be the most amazing thing in the world. But no guys, seriously, thank you so much again for tuning in and letting me be your narrator. I just wanted to say, obviously, from the previous video, if you haven't watched it yet, go ahead, but there was a story that I wrote. Okay guys, I'm going to tell you which one is the one I wrote. So, you guys might be surprised, but it's kind of a trick question. So, basically, all those stories that were told were in fact true, except for the last one. There were certain parts where I kind of changed a little bit, and I made certain details a little different. So, I made my version of the story because, I don't know, it sounded bad at first, and I was like, I'm not going to read this, but then I was like, I have an idea. So what I did was I told all these true stories that were supposedly true, and for the last story on that video, I just, switched some details a little bit, made it more interesting, and, kind of made it more realistic to throw you guys off so you guys wouldn't be able to guess so easily. And it seems like nobody guessed that the last one was fake. So, I guess some of it is true, but like I said, I changed up some small details here and there, so it's realistic fiction, what do you call it? It's real fake, whatever you want to call it. Also, shout out to the 5 pledgers who pledged to my Patreon. I really appreciate it, guys. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Really appreciate that. And you guys don't have to pledge at all, but I really appreciate you supporting the channel, so that means a lot, especially during this huge, demonetization phase and, things happening left and right, people pulling their poop out and just, shoving it in other people's pockets, and, it's all mayhem. So I don't know what I'm talking about, guys. I didn't say anything funny until now, so whatever. Yeah, guys, remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe. I'm heading out. Okay, guys, good night, good morning. I'll see you in the next video. Love you guys. Sorry the outro took so long to finish, but you know me.